Lecture 1, Part 3. How did humans cope with the Ice Age? The simple answer to this question is that they coped surprisingly well. Today we tend to see cold areas as extremely inhospitable, but the last great Ice Age began around 150,000 years ago, and it is perhaps no coincidence that this is also the date of the Great Human Migration. Our ancestors did not just survive the cold, they seem to have actively sought it. Ice ages occur when the northern hemisphere moves away from the sun. Every 100,000 years or so, a distortion in the Earth's orbit tugs at the north, and on more frequent intervals, the Earth wobbles on its axis. The temperature change is dramatic, and we only started to emerge from the last great ice age about 18,000 years ago. The ice caps covered an immense region down to the Missouri and Ohio rivers in North America, covering all of Scandinavia and most of Britain. But south of this vast area was an area of tundra, which covered Eurasia almost to the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Tundra is a treeless region with a permanently frozen subsoil. In Central Asia, the Steppe Lands were enormous areas of dry plains covered with scrubgrass. And in other areas south of the ice caps, there were forests of coniferous trees. These areas were all excellent hunting grounds for Ice Age man. When the ice started to melt around 18,000 years ago, the sea levels rose, and the shape of the world took on roughly its current shape. During the thousands and thousands of years of cold during the Ice Age, many animals had adapted to become more efficient at storing their own body fat. And it was this that was such a boon to Ice Age hunters. Hunters also developed more effective techniques, and cave art shows the fires and driving lanes which were used to drive large numbers of animals to their deaths over cliffs or into bogs and lakes. At the foot of one cliff in France, the remains of 10,000 horses have been found. And in the Czech Republic, the remains of 100 mammoths have been found in pits. Around 20,000 years ago, however, the bow and arrow was invented, and the hunters had another efficient method of killing fat-rich food from a distance. Historians talk of Ice Age affluence, and indeed the Ice Age people enjoyed high levels of nutrition and long days of leisure, which were unequalled by most later societies. And it is only in modern societies that their intake of around 3,000 calories a day is surpassed. This increased leisure time gave Ice Age societies more time to think and create, and the art from this period is truly amazing. The themes they chose to express can tell us a lot about what was important to them. One of the most famous works of art from this time is the Venus of Willendorf, which is about 30,000 years old, and it is named for the region of Germany in which it was found, Willendorf. She is a plump female and has been interpreted as a goddess, a ruler, or a symbol of fertility. Another recent archaeological find is at Lorsel in France, similarly of a fat woman, this one carved into the wall of a cave. She is raising a horn, evidently filled with food or drink, and so the symbolism may be related to plenty, indulgence, and enjoyment. Another spectacular form of Ice Age art is cave painting, and these are found in around 50 caves scattered across Spain and southern France. Of these, the Chauvet Caves are perhaps the most spectacular, and they are the subject of a 2011 film by director Walter Herzog called The Cave of Forgotten Dreams. These caves were discovered in 1994 in southeastern France, and this was the most extensive system of caves covered with Ice Age art ever discovered. And carbon dating has placed their execution over a long period of time, from around 30,000 years ago to around 23,000 years ago. The discovery of the Chauvet paintings overturned everything that we thought we knew about Ice Age art. Scholars used to assume, not unreasonably, that Ice Age art had developed over time. Thus, they developed from the brief sketches of earliest artists, to the sublime paintings found at Altamira in Spain or Lascaux in France, which are around 10 to 15,000 years old. Therefore, the much older Chauvet paintings should have been more primitive than those executed 10 to 15,000 years later. But they are not. They are equal in technique and skill and very similar in subject matter. This bears witness to a continuation of culture that is almost unimaginable to us, a culture that stretched over 20,000 years. This covers a much longer span of human history than that from ourselves to the earliest biblical patriarchs or the pyramid builders, and almost 4 times longer than the span of time from the builders of Stonehenge to ourselves. This continuity also reflects the stability and affluence of Iron Age societies. Art, however, was not just created in Ice Age Europe. Other people to the south were also finding time and inspiration to create. In Namibia, in southwest Africa, 4 rock slabs have been found, painted with animals, which date to around 26,000 years ago. And even in Australia, painted rocks have been found. In Arnhem Land in southwest Australia, we can still see the images of long dead giant kangaroos and scary snakes. At Kenneth in Australia, 20,000 years ago, people stenciled the outlines of their hands, and we can still see those today. These European Ice Age hunters and African and Australian hunter-gatherers depicted the animals they saw and themselves, but they did it in a way that speaks of an imagined world as well as the real world, a world full of spirits, a magical world that could be accessed through trances. Though people in this period had nothing that we would recognise as writing, clues to this spiritual life can be found in the symbols they used. In Ice Age art, certain gestures and postures recur in realistic depictions. And there also seem to be numbers signified by dots and notches. And what may have been a calendar has been found in the Dordogne region of France on a flat bone carved with crescents and circles, which may represent the phases of the moon. One widely recurring mark resembles our modern letter P, and experts think this may be a symbol for female, the curve of the P representing a woman's curves, which may be in keeping with the plump female figures like the Venus of Willendorf. Another clue to spiritual life comes from traces of red ochre, the earliest substance known which had a role in ritual. The earliest ochre mine is in Lesotho in southern Africa, in a place known as the Lion Cave, and this is datable to 42,000 years ago. This vivid red colour we know was applied in burials, and we can wonder at the symbolism and what was perhaps meant by this red colour. Was it a precious offering, or did it symbolise blood and the reinvestment of the dead with life? In Iron Age art, we can see figures of people wearing animal masks, and anthropological studies of the recent past have demonstrated that such disguises are normally efforts of a shaman to communicate with the dead or with gods. In many societies, even today, shamans communicate with the spirit world, and they paint their bodies or disguise themselves as spirits or the animals, and they are thought to have access to realms beyond human senses. These shamans fall into trances induced by dancing, drumming, or drugs, and have a high social standing as healers, prophets, and arbitrators. We know that some people in Iron Age society were privileged above others, from the inequalities in the way they were buried. At Sanghia near Moscow, there is a 24,000-year-old cemetery with a burial of an elderly man with a cap made of fox's teeth and 20 ivory bracelets. While this might suggest merely reverence for age, another two burials were found nearby, which were of mere boys, one about 8 years of age and one about 10 years of age. And these boys were buried with even more spectacular ornaments. As well as the ivory braces, necklaces, and fox-tooth buttons, these boys also had with them carved animals and spears over 6 foot long carved from mammoth ivory, far too big to have actually been used by them. Over their limbs, torso, and head, each boy had around 3,500 finely carved ivory beads, each representing hours of labor. The lavish burials of these boys strongly suggests the development of a society with leaders, and leaders who were not those who had attained positions by the feats of their lives, but those who were born into that role.